Hi guys, and welcome back to another fly tying tutorial. What you see in the vise is a fly called Shep's pheasant tail. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The hook in the vise then is a Hanak H230 barbless hook. This one's at size 10, it's on a medium wire and it's finished in black nickel. The thread I'm going to be using today is from Simplify. It's the Nano Silk at 12/0, and as you can see, it's a red thread. Now, as always with the Nano Silks, we're going to get a little spot of super glue onto the shank of the hook. And this just helps adhere the silk to the black nickel finish. Wax doesn't cut it, super glue does the job. So I'm getting a bed of silk all the way down to where a barb would be on a barbed fly. Next then we're going to add tailing fibres, and what I'm using is an old ginger cape, and I've selected a feather from it. It's just a very soft cock cape fibres, and what I want to do is take about 1 centimetre worth from the stem. I'm pulling it out at a 90-degree angle, and I'm going to pull that away. Use my thumb and forefinger of my right hand just to pull that all together, dress it up to the hook, and I want about the length of the body. I'll lay that on, and once I've trapped that into place, I can then come in and remove my waste piece. Now, the next thing I want to do is add my rib, and on this occasion I'm using some copper wire from Pheasant. It's 0.14 in diameter, and it works well with this fly. The diameter's not too bulky as it overphases the fly, and it's not too thin that it disappears into the body. So I'm going to come down and just park my thread at the butt end of the fly. Then we come onto the body itself, and what I'm using is some natural pheasant tail. The longer the fibres you can get, the better it is. These are not particularly long, and I'm going to take about 4 or 5 fibres from the stem. Now, before I dress it up to the fly itself, I just want to remove these tips. The tip sections are the most fragile, and I don't want to catch them in, because you end up with this breaking away. Now I'm going to just bring it up to the thorax area. I don't have to get very far with it, to be fair. I'm going to get plenty extra turns in at the thorax, as I'm going to use the rotary function on my vise to bring the body round. So I'm just going to avoid the hook point. If you catch the hook point with pheasant tail, it's only going to end one way, and you'll be crying yourself to sleep on your giant pillow. So I've managed to avoid the worst of the hook point, and I'm now just bringing the fibres up the shank. And that'll do the job. And then I can come over with my silk, and once I've trapped it into place, I'm going to just tidy up like so, and then I can come in and snip away the pheasant tail. Next, we're going to bring the wire rib in the opposite direction to the way the body went down, so that the rib stands out a little, but I don't want it to overphase the fly. Then when I get to the thorax, I can secure that in with a couple of turns in front, keeping pressure on the thread. I can then helicopter that away. So the good news is that's the easy part out the way. Now what happens next is quite busy. The fly becomes quite more technical. So what we're going to do, first of all, whichever material's coming over first has got to be tied in first. So the last thing that's going to come over the front of my fly is the thorax cover, and what I'm using is some mirror tinsel. It's 0.8 millimeters. I've got a little bit cut off here, ready to tie in. Now before I start tying in everything that's going to go in the head, the thorax, I'm going to get a little bit of wax on, and there is a significant amount of material is going to be tied in here. So I'll get my thorax covered down first, and that's sitting on top of the shank of the hook. The next thing to go on then is my cheeks, and what I'm using, again, it's from Semplify. It's the Flow Orange Goose Biots. I've already picked a couple from the stem, and I want to catch them in by their tips, like so. I'll bring the other one up on your side. And catch that in. Now before I carry on, I just want to turn the vise, and I'm not quite happy with how that's sitting, so I'm just going to ease it over a bit more. Let's have a look. Perfect. Ideal. So far so good. Now for the head itself, we're going to use pheasant tail again, only this time I don't want to take more than a couple of strands, maybe 3 at the most. So I've taken that off the stem, and again I'm going to just get rid of the very thinnest parts at the top end where it might well break away, and then I can trap that in. Now as you can see, there's a whole lot going on in the thorax area of this fly, so you've got to leave yourself lots of room at the front, because all that material is going to come forward shortly, and you need to have space to keep it neat. So all I'm doing now is creating a rugby ball with my nano silk, and I'm going to bring my thread to the front once more. Now Shep's pheasant tail, it's a long story. Shep's pheasant tail, he was an angler with the Soldier Palmers back in the day, and he was from the Scots Guards. So he was a very, how can I say this politely, he was a character for sure, and but he was an absolute fishing addict. He went on to win the Trout Masters competition actually, but I think it did cost him his marriage in the end. But he came up with this fly, and it became a staple of the team, and I just don't use it very much nowadays, probably because it's such a faff to tie, but certainly I did a post recently about old patterns falling out of favour, and this has certainly fallen out of favour with me, but I've just tied up about 10 of them just to make sure I've got some in my box, because they can be lethal on their day. So all I've done there is added a little bit of super glue to the mound I've created, and this is going to help me when I bring the pheasant fibre over to create my thorax. Now, yeah, going back to Shep, I believe he moved to Canada after he'd left the service, and then I believe he got thrown out of Canada, but I'm not sure of the story behind that. I'm sure it's an interesting one. But I brought my pheasant fibres over, and I've caught them in. Then I can come in with my scissors and just remove them. Don't be tempted to try and just pull them away. It will just cause you a world of pain. The next thing then is the goose biots. They come forward, and I like to do these together. So bring them both forward like so. Try and keep your thorax cover out of the way. It's not its time yet. And then just a loose wrap to get them into position, like so. And then once you're happy where they're sitting, you can then keep pressure on your thread and just twist them biots away. And then the last material to come over is the thorax cover itself. Now what I like to do with this is get my thread right up to the eye, and once I've got it right up to the eye, I'll give it a little pull to get it flat, bring it back on itself, get a few wraps, and then come in and remove the excess, at which point you can concentrate on just building a neat head. Now black thread works for the head just as well, but my personal taste for this particular pattern is this nice red thread. It does pop a little, gives it another trigger point. I'll come in with my hackle pliers. No, I won't. I'll come in with my whip finish tool and finish the fly off and remove the waste. To finish the fly, I'm going to use some UV resin. On this occasion, it's Solaris Bone Dry. I'll just come in and get a coat on the head. I'm not overly worried about the resin going into the eye at the moment. As you can see, that's happened. I've got a little feather here that I've had ready, and I'm going to just feed that up through the eye just to remove that excess resin. Then I can bring my UV gadget on and cure that resin. Now the best way of fishing this, and this was the beauty of Shep's pheasant tail, you could fish it as a pulling fly, believe it or not. So it worked well on floating line, just being pulled through the surface. Or you can fish it as part of a team on a washing line, and it did every bit as good a job. So there we go, Shep's pheasant tail. I hope wherever he is, he's not in jail and he's doing okay for himself. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.